Hi, I'm Ulrike Feld, and I'm Professor of Science Studies at the University of Vienna.
I'm Pierre-Benoît Joly. I'm directeur de recherche at the National Institute for Agricultural Research in France.
I'm Tereza Šteklová, sociologist working with the Institute of Sociology, Czech Academy of Sciences.
Today we will talk about this report that has just come out. It's a policy briefing that deals with science in society, caring for our futures in turbulent times. And actually the point of this report, which might seem quite of a topic, might address a topic that has been quite frequently been addressed in the past, it seems important to us to kind of reopen it, because we think we live at a moment in time where important changes are taking place, where reorderings in our societies matter a lot, and we could point at the feeling of crisis that is around Europe, the kind of idea of austerity that is more prevalent in certain countries than in others, while at the same time innovation is so high on the agenda and is believed to be the motor of future developments in our societies. So we've brought together, under the auspices of the European Science Foundation, a group of scholars, and have brought in a number of other people who have been discussing these issues over the past, I think, 1.5 years by now, trying to figure out what are the specificities we would need to take care of when thinking about science in society. And I have on my side two colleagues that have accompanied this process and have been essential in pushing this enterprise to a successful end, or actually to a successful start, because the report should only be seen as a starting point of an engagement process that we all will be carrying together in our countries, but also across these countries in the following months. So maybe it would be a good idea that you shortly say something about your position on this report and why you think it is important from your point of view, maybe what that means in terms of France as a place from where to speak about these kinds of issues. And then Tereza, you might say a couple of words from a kind of culturally differently situated part within Europe, from the Czech Republic, in order to see how all our different histories and backgrounds matter. And this is one of the big messages, I think, of this report, is to think about diversity within Europe and not to have one homogeneous European model for dealing with issues of science in society. So whoever would like to start first.
Let's say a couple of words about the Czech Republic at first, and the situation regarding the conception of science and society in the public and policy discourse. So for a long time there has been the tradition of science being quite detached from society, scientists having very high prestige in the public space without really being asked to give accounts for what they are doing. The progress resulting from scientific activity was sort of taken for granted. In the last couple of years we have witnessed a number of policy changes and initiatives that started to ask much more, let's say, accountability from scientists in relation to society. But this all was phrased primarily and mainly, really only in economic terms.
Yeah.
And this was also accompanied by a shift of public funding towards private research institutions. So the public research institutions, and researchers, they reacted by quite a strong defense of so-called fundamental research, claiming, you have to leave us working for a long time and then, it will be delivered, whatever this it is. And I think that this is very dangerous dichotomy to be caught in. Either basic research that we don't need to talk about and discuss within public debates and with different society actors, or very straightforward sort of giving accounts in economic terms next year, in 2 years, in 3 years. So for me, this report is an attempt to articulate some, let's say, third or fourth or fifth position in this debate, that we want to show that it is important that scientists engage with society in different ways, quite immediately, which does not mean that this all has to be reduced to economic benefits, that it has to be very immediate, and that it has to interfere in some very dramatic way in how scientists do their work and go about their everyday practices. Of course, not dramatic, but some changes we also propose in terms of having much more time space for reflexive work in everyday scientific practices.
So would you say that it's very much about bringing back the societal perspective into the research process and to make it visible in a much broader sense than, for example, you said economic terms, and to bring that this report would do that kind of work for you? And are you hoping to kind of trigger some debate in the Czech context on that basis?
This would be great. And in fact, my experience with natural scientists is that they do care about what they bring to society. They are not careless. Of course, they enjoy immensely what they do in their everyday practice, if it's not administration, but the laboratory benchwork. But they also do care, and I think that they would in fact welcome to have more opportunities to discuss.
So it's about creating
those
space
issues. Yeah.
for kind of caring for these kinds of questions within research. Okay. So what would it mean for you from a kind of other part of Europe, the French context?
First, I guess that the report is very important because, as we point out in the title, we live in turbulent times where there is a sense that research and innovation is very important to meet the grand challenges, as we say in Europe. But there are a lot of uncertainties, a lot of complexities in the way science and society relations are governed. So I guess that the report is very important for scientists, for people in charge of science communications as well, but also for people in companies, for people in civil societies and so on and so forth. I guess that one of the diagnostics is that, as it is said also in the title, science is in society, which does not mean that it is a profession as it's found. And we had a nice workshop, among the workshops we organized, dealing with this, with the sense for scientists that with the new public management, they lose the autonomy of the profession, and they are driven by the market or by the states, and that the autonomy of the profession is under threat. But science is in society, and the second message is that we do not have to see society as a problem. Society is really a resource for innovation, and one of the link between science and society is obviously innovation. So one of the important points is how to govern innovation, and to this respect actually there are several messages. One is inclusiveness, and we have already mentioned that, but it is very important to think that the way science may impact society is very much related to productive interactions. So interactions with many actors, and not only companies. Companies are important, obviously, but many actors are also important, have to have their say on the construction of the knowledge and the use of knowledge. The second message is on plurality of technologies, but also plurality of the way to innovate. And one of the major challenges now is social innovation. So the reflection on the types of innovation which comes from the possibility of groups locally based to organize themselves, meet their problems, and interact with research to solve the problem. And the third message perhaps is the need for reflexivity in research and reflexivity on the way research is steered, is governed, but also on the creation of new spaces for interaction with society. And we are not at the end of the story. There is a lot of work to do still, and we have to have a lot of spaces of experimentation, share this experimentation, and reflect on this to improve the relation between science and society.
So you picked up two terms. You underlined the notion of turbulence.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important because it points at the constant change and the not always orderliness of change. And the second thing is you very nicely pointed out is this diversity issue. So the plurality, the different needs that need to be expressed. And I think that has then created also, has led us to put forward this notion of logic of care, in a sense because we need to care for complex processes and not simply to frame what we do in terms of choices, do this or that, but see that as a kind of continuous process of adapting and reworking. And only by doing that, I think one of the points is actually that we can respond to turbulences and to make a system more resilient in terms of both science and society. And I think the points you both brought together quite nicely show why caring is such an important part of this title, which actually underlines this process kindness of what we have to do.
And it speaks quite directly to how we imagine research policy to be carried out, because when we think in the logic of decision and its implementation, then you don't really need care. You need maybe monitoring if tasks are delivered, things like that. But at caring, it's very different logic. You start from it's uncertain, it's complex, and you have to go very iteratively and to hear and to see what you create by what you do, and so sort of readapt in different feedbacks and loops. So unpredictability of what you do and what type of effects it creates. I think this is something to be taken very seriously, and it relates to research policy on one hand, but also on the very way how innovation develops in society.
And in a way we understand, if I may say, the whole report as a piece in this caring process, in the sense that we have to carry it on. It's not done, you cannot post it somewhere and then, or put it on the web, or send around a Twitter message, or I don't know where you put it onto your Facebook account. But the point is actually really that this is a process that has to be instigated, and that this report can be the kind of the triggering moment for this rethinking exercise. And I think it starts now. It's the end of a process where we have been sitting together and thinking through different topics, but I think it's the start of another process. And it's interesting to see what life this report will take on, in a sense, or how much space there is to take on an idea of care in a world that is so much about control and monitoring and assessment and auditing, etc. So I'm looking forward to kind of get an impression of the space for care we have, actually. Should we go for that?